Hi, juniors. This is some information about the Sheridan Baker Thesis Machine to make your argumentative essays as strong as possible. So what you're supposed to do right now is read through and listen to all of these slides, write down any notes you want to take from them, and any questions you have that you can ask me when we all come back together. And you need to work on the activities listed, all 5 steps, as you go. So make a copy of the document that's posted in Google Classroom, typo there, sorry, according to the argumentative essay topic that you selected. So the thing that you'd like to be arguing about is what you're working with. You'll submit that finished document to the Google Classroom folder during this period. Just some background to remind you what is a thesis. Why are we spending so much time working on this one sentence? The term a thesis comes from the Greek word for pudding or position. So a thesis statement tells the reader, your audience, what your position is on whatever issue you're discussing. In other words, what side of the argument you're on. What does a thesis do? It's the core of your argument. It's the unifying principle that holds your essay together. So an effective thesis can help you develop your own perspective, so you're adding something new to the existing dialogue about the issue, and stay on track, right? If your paper was a body, the thesis is the spine, and everything that you write, the paragraphs, they're all like the ribs and the other bones that you build onto that spine. So it's the promise of what your paper will accomplish, and therefore it must be clear, direct, and focused. We need to practice seeing both sides of what possible positions exist. So here are 4 different topics with 2 different sides. Animal research and testing is abusive and cruel. That might be what you believe, but someone who disagrees with you might say, animal research and testing is a necessary sacrifice for human health. On the topic of school uniforms negate students' ability to reflect a healthy individuality. Someone who disagrees would say, school uniforms would increase students' focus on academics. Next topic, textbooks are outdated, bad for the environment, and harm student posture. Someone who disagrees could say, textbooks are beneficial since they're easier for students to study from than tablets. And final topic, the Electoral College does not reflect a true democracy of the population. However, someone who disagrees might argue, the Electoral College ensures that all states have equal voice in the USA. Here's the first activity on that document that's posted in Google Classroom that you should have a copy of, so you can pause and work on this. So you have, on one side, cigarettes are good for the economy and bring in taxes. So to argue the other side, you might say what? And if someone says about homework, well, it takes away students' opportunities for family connections and extracurriculars. Okay, so what's a positive you could argue for homework? Next one, the death penalty scares potential criminals from going through with potential illegal activities. So how would you argue against the death penalty? And finally, the penny is outdated since it costs more than 1 cent to produce each one. So what would you say in defense of the penny? Again, pause and fill this out. For our class example, we're going to use the topic of meat. So let's brainstorm some pros and cons to each side, starting with the pros of meat as part of a human diet. We could say it provides necessary nutrients like iron and protein. The farm industries employ many people, so it's good for the economy. It helps build muscles, especially for athletes, and a lot of people like the taste. Those who want to argue against meat as part of a human diet could point out how it leads to health problems like high cholesterol. Some studies say there are increased cancer risks after consuming meat. It requires killing animals, and those factory-raised animals are often not put in humane environments. And those farms, for various reasons, can have a negative impact on the environment. So you'll see us discuss meat as we fill in the next steps. So what the Sheridan Baker Thesis Machine looks like is 5 steps. We're going to go through them one by one. You have a copy of this on that document. This is a 5-step process created by an educator named Sheridan Baker, and it crafts your thesis into the strongest possible setup for your essay. So step 1 is just to put the word of your topic. So we're using meat as an example. Yours might be, gun control, immigration, something like that. School start time. So step 1 is very short. Step 2, the issue, makes it a little longer. State the specific issue in the form of a debating proposition for something. The issue answers the question what. So what about meat? What is the issue about meat that you want to argue? Eating meat is bad for the environment. Okay, so think about your topic and how you can explain very briefly to someone what is it you want to argue about that topic. So reminder, you have this to fill in on your document. What do you hope to argue about? Step 1, just like one word usually. And step 2, what is it that you specifically believe and want to argue about your topic? And that becomes a longer phrase. Feel free to pause this and fill it in. Step 3, we're getting into the more complicated parts. That's your position and your rationale. So you add a because to what you've been working on. Your topic and issue are your positions. So when you use a because clause, you convert that into something that states your position on the issue, but also provides a rationale, provides some reason for why that's your position, why you believe that. Hence, a rationale usually answers the question why you believe in your side. So for the meat example, eating meat is bad for the environment because, there's the because, factory farms produce waste and consume too much water. Okay, and there are other reasons people could argue for this, but here's, for our example, the main one that we would be forming our thoughts around. So do that for yourself. Answer the question why you believe in your position. Okay, you believe blank because. So think through the because. If you've been doing the research, then you should have some strong ideas here. Step 4, getting a little trickier because we need to polish and qualify. It's our although clause. So to refine the rough thesis, you need to add any qualifications to consider the other side. So it's like acknowledging that another belief exists, and although clauses are good for this. And then for better style, you should drop the overt use of because. So you still have your rationale present, but it's not so blatantly stated. So you're kind of improving your voice and style. An example for the meat topic could be, although meat has essential nutrients like protein, comma, the negatives for the environment are unsustainable and humans should cut factory farmed meat out of their diets. Okay, so that first part, the although, then you acknowledge what the other side believes, and then comma, you get into your position again. Why do you believe your side? This, step 4, is your thesis. This is the sentence you will end up putting into the introduction of your argumentative essay. So take some time to do this. Try to rephrase it to drop the word because and to add acknowledgement of the other side. So although, and then you write something about like an exception or what the other side believes, comma, and then you believe your side. Do your best with this. If you want to wait and write step 4 and 5 after you finish the whole video, there's a couple other samples that might help you. Step 5 is where you reverse to test. So you argue as though you were on the opposite perspective from what you really are. You test your faith in the thesis and expose potential counterarguments by reversing your position. So the example has been from the con side of meat. Let's pretend we were standing on the pro side of meat. Although factory farming has some negatives, comma, meat is an essential aspect of a healthy diet. Okay, so this position is going to defend meat, even though it acknowledges that it's not perfect. If you can create a clear and valid counterargument, then your thesis is most likely worth arguing. But if there's no counterargument possible, like no one in the world would disagree with you, you have no audience to persuade. So your topic, or at least your position on it, needs to change or be improved a little bit. So this step 5, it's not your thesis. It just makes sure you are aware what your opposition believes, and it tests to make sure your step 4 thesis is strong. So step 5 does not go in your essay. It just exists as part of this Sheridan Baker process. That's it. Take some time now to try that, to write from the perspective of someone who believes the exact opposite of you. And if you can't think of a counterargument, then we might need to rethink your topic. So again, pause, work this out, and remember, this is not your thesis. This is an imaginary thesis from one of your imaginary opponents. Here are more examples if you want some ideas, some clarity before you work on your own. If the topic was grades and the issue is that you're bothered that grades are required in college, a possible thesis to state that with because would be grades should not be required in college because students learn better without that pressure. So step 3 could work as a thesis, but we're going to go into step 4 to make it stronger. The way that Sheridan Baker argued makes a better beginning to an essay. Although there may be a legitimate need to evaluate the work of college students, the traditional grading system hinders learning and stifles creativity. So that's the one that would be plugged into your essay later. But first, we have to double check that another side exists and that it's worth taking the time to make this argument. So, step 5, the reversal. Although traditional grading procedures may stifle certain students, the public school system requires clear evaluations. Okay, so both of those arguments in step 4 or step 5 make sense and are defendable and could become an essay. So your test reveals that yes, your step 4 will be a good thesis to go on. Another example, if the topic was freshman writing classes and your issue with them is the fact that they are mandatory, like required in college, then your step 3 could be why does it bother you? Add the because. Well, freshman writing should be mandatory in college because many freshmen are poor writers. So this is a pro freshman writing class thesis, and we can make it even stronger in step 4 by polishing and qualifying it. Although some gifted high school graduates should be exempt from freshman writing classes, most entering students need such significant help in improving their college writing skills that they should be required to take a freshman writing course. So that would be the thesis. It says the same thing as step 3, but with more details, more clarity. Acknowledges the other side. So let's test in step 5. Is there an opposite argument? Although freshman writing classes may have value for some students, most high school graduates possess writing skills that are already sufficient for success in college, and they should not be forced to spend a semester reviewing. Okay, so both step 4 and 5 are fine arguments, which means that your thesis in step 4 could work. You could spend the time researching and building up that argument. So again, if you haven't paused yet to fill in your 5 steps, do that, and also write down any questions you still have floating around your mind so that we can address them when we come back together as a live class in a little bit. And your final steps, remember to make a copy of the document if you haven't yet. You hopefully were working on it as we went along. There are 2 activities in there. The first one, practicing looking at a different side, and the final one, filling in all 5 steps for your argumentative essay topic. Put that into the Google Classroom folder as soon as possible, like it's due during the period. It's just a rough draft, so don't panic too much. Our goal is to share it with some peers for feedback and give me a chance to type up some feedback for you in Google Classroom. You will revise it if necessary, like fix it, make it stronger, and you'll be submitting the final draft as your homework. It will go to turnitin.com, not Google Classroom. So don't forget, there is a Turnitin folder for your fixed final draft.